Hey everybody, it's Teri Lucas and this is the book report. Today I have with me Kirsten Fisher. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did. Yep.
Kirsten Fisher, who is the author of Round Fabric Art Bowls. Oh my gosh, you guys are going to just love this so much because I am actually in awe of Kirsten's ability to take something flat and curve it up. Like there is a sense of architecture and serious design to take something that is flat and curve it around something to get a round bowl. You and I were just talking, Kirsten. Can you tell me a little bit about your background as a quilter and then how you got into making these bowls?
Yeah. So at heart, I'm a quilter. I love the quilt block. I discovered quilting when I came to America in 1977, and I fell in love with it instantly. At one point, my mother complained she couldn't find her keys, and I decided to make her a bowl. And as a quilter at heart, I decided to transform a two-dimensional quilt block, the Ohio Star, into a three-dimensional bowl.
Oh, wow.
And that's what got me started on it. So my first bowls were always based on quilt blocks.
Okay. So you were just holding up your first book, and so it sounds like your first bowls came out of necessity, actually.
Yeah, I sort of like to make things that can be used.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I like about quilting. So the first book came out. I made this little bowl for my mother, and then it sort of evolved into how to perfect the process. It was a very whimsical, not particularly well-made bowl, and over the years I worked on how to cut a pattern, how to fuse the fabric, and the trick to making a quilt block into a bowl is that you have to hide the seams, because otherwise it loses its effect as a block. And so it means that the technique I came up with was a two-layered bowl. There's an inside layer and an outside layer, and they're created separately.
Okay.
And you fuse them together into one bowl in the end. That's the last step you do in the process.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Do you was there a favorite bowl that you made?
I have, unfortunately, I don't have it at home because it's out for a photo shoot, but I absolutely have a favorite bowl. Let's see, I think I can look. There's several bowls of mine that are favorite. I was lucky enough, one of them is this embroidery bowl, embroidered by,
goodness.
Yes, I found that you can do applique and embroidery on these bowls. So this is done by a group of women in South Africa called the Mapula Project, and they were kind enough to embroider the inside bowl for me. And I have something I worked with. I did a let me see where it is. A little black bowl here, where the things are hanging out over the edge. I don't have these home, unfortunately. It's on my favorite bowls that I made. It's just, but the thing is, because the bowls are made two separate layers, you could add applique and embroidery to it if you want to. It's not just quilting.
So okay, so that was actually my next question: is how is that part of the process done? Because I'm thinking of the shape of the bowl and then trying to get your hands in there to do that.
So let me show. So the first thing I do is I draw the pattern out at interfacing, and this is a pattern for the round bowl. And I draw it. I have a template, and I draw the pattern out at interfacing.
Okay.
And when that is done, I cut out the interfacing like this.
Okay.
And then I fuse it to fabric. It's a simple process, like this. This is the outside layer.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
I fuse it to out, and then I sew the seams together, and then I have the outside layer done. The trick is when I do the pattern, the distance in see if I can show that here. The template is just this size, so that because they are not all the way dealt up, that's when you get the shape.
Okay. Now, do you use for your seams, are you using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or are you zigzagging over?
No, I'm not zigzagging on anything.
Okay.
I'll show you exactly how it's done. See, this is a part of an inside bowl.
Okay.
This would be one piece. I cut out the individual pieces like this. Right. I fused
Okay.
the fabric and I cut it out with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around it.
Okay, I see.
That means when I sew them together, I literally just line them up and sew along the seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I just sew along the edge here. So there's no gap between the interfacings when I sew the pieces together.
So even doing that last seam, everything is still laying flat.
Yes.
So when you do that last seam, everything is still laying flat. So you're not struggling with a big curve as you're coming together.
The problem comes when you're going to sew 2 layers like these together.
Uh-huh.
Then you will run into one inside the other, and you will run into it's harder to get them to lay flat. So you start with sewing this one that will always be flat, and then you pin and pin and pin, and then you sew.
Okay.
But it's not that difficult to get it to sew, because you really just you have your seam allowance, you pin them together, and you just sew all the way through, and that's it. And then you have the inside of the bowl.
Now, is there a particular technique for pressing the seam allowance in one direction or the other?
You don't press the seam allowance at all.
Oh, okay.
Because here's the thing. The seam allowance is right next to fusible interfacing. This is fusible interfacing. Okay. So if you start to press the seam allowance, it will fuse onto the, and your iron's gonna get broken.
Right.
There are some incidents where if you have a round bowl where you will fuse the seam into the interfacing, but then I always recommend you do half a seam instead of a 1/4 seam allowance.
Okay.
So that, and then the final thing, the bowl will end up looking like this.
Right. And so when how do you, it looks like the back side or the outside is coming over to kind of close everything up. Is that what you do consistently?
No, you can either do that, or you can put, this has a binding on it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You can do different ways. In the first book, it shows you different possibilities. In the second book, we only do a binding. Okay. It's easier to do a binding when it's a round shape and not a straight shape, because you have to stretch it a little bit. And so there's a slight measurement difference between this edge and this edge down here. So that's why I do a binding on the round bolt. But you don't have to. There are many different ways to finish it off. You can actually fit with a zigzag if you want to. So.
And are you using bias binding, or are you using cross grain binding? Because there's just enough.
I just use bias binding. I cut it bias binding. So but all the interfacing is double-sided fusible interfacing, the heavy double-sided interfacing.
Is there a particular brand of?
There are 2 brands on the market. There's Peltex 72, which fuses at a cutting setting with a dam sheet on top of it. Then there is Fast to Fuse Heavy, which fuses at a cotton setting without a sheet on top of it. I don't have a preference. I think that maybe the Fast to Fuse a little tighter than the Peltex. There's also a price difference. So for the outside bowl, I pretty much always use the Peltex, because it's easier to work with and it's a cotton setting. But sometimes I'll use the Fast to Fuse on the inside of the bowl. It depends. Depends on on what I'm working with. You can, if you work with silk, you're gonna have to use Peltex only. You cannot use Fast to Fuse.
Is that because of the heat setting?
Yes, because Peltex is on wool setting and Fast to Fuse is on cotton setting.
Okay, all right. That actually makes sense, because you don't want to go too high with the heat setting on silk, because you'll burn it.
Yes. So that's
what are some of the other tools that you use in making this? Like, do you use Sharpies? Do you use do you have a specific add a quarter ruler or anything like that?
I just use a regular template with a 1/4 inch. I use the one thing I use. I do use the 65 millimeter
Okay.
because you're cutting through sometimes through interfacing, and it's better to cut with this one. It's a little bit bigger, it goes a little bit faster. So that's my favorite thing. And otherwise, no, there's really it's pretty much sewing things. It is great if you have a 1/4 seam allowance on your sewing machine, but it's not totally necessary. And yeah, it's regular sewing needles would do great.
Are you using top stitching needles? Are you using
I use micro tip, I think they're called,
microtex needles?
Yes, I like those. If you're going to sew through, if you're going to, the bowls could be quilted.
Okay.
If you're going to quilt them, you're going to do at least a 90 needle.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you're quilting through 2 layers of interfacing. If you do that, you can quilt layers separately, or you can quilt them together in one bowl. That you can do both. So yeah, I've quilted some of my bowls, and you need a stronger needle for that. So it's
great. And do you have a particular type of needle, like or a needle coating that you like to use, like chrome or?
No, I just use what's available.
That you know what, that actually makes it easier for anybody who's watching, that they can go to their local quilt shop and essentially get all the supplies that they need.
Yes, the one thing that is good to have, it's good to have a strong seam ripper.
Okay.
Not that you're going to rip a lot of seams up, but when you bend interfacing, like you will be doing here, to get a nice curve, it bends nicer if you have just scored it with a seam ripper all the way around.
Okay.
Don't cut through the line interfacing, but you just score with a point of seam ripper, and it bends much nicer in the line you exactly want. Otherwise, so that's the one thing I always use.
Right. Would a stiletto work for that as well?
The what?
Would a stiletto work?
I have not tried that, but it probably would. But I like to see it because it's metal.
Right. Got it.
It's got to cut that just the surface, not cut through, but just the surface of the interfacing. So.
Right. You want to make it just bendable.
Yes, just bendable in a straight line. So it's
right. And what was the most surprising thing about writing this new book, making all of these round bowls, and when did you do this? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I did. I wrote the first book, started in 19, and then the second book I started in 21 or 22 or something like that.
Okay.
The pandemic. And it was a bit more of a challenge, because it is harder to work. It was harder to create an easy way of showing how to make the round bowl. The square bowl is really easy. It's straight line, it's straight measurements, it's a really easy bowl. The round bowl require a little bit about how do you get people to make the design and to come up with actually an easy way of making, and come up with templates. I had not really created, I had my own template I made for fun for myself up until this point, but I hadn't made a template for the round bowl. I used measurements. But then when you get into a book that is going to go in centimeters, inches, and I'm very fussy with centimeter measurements because I'm from Denmark. I grew up with centimeters, and I do not believe in 0.7 centimeters. Nobody uses that. It doesn't happen. I mean, it's just, so I wasn't going to go there. So I realized I had to made a template that did not require measurements to get the exact, because otherwise when you use the other designs of the book, I mean, there are designs like, let me just show you. See if I can show what that is. I mean, there's designs like this design.
Oh, that's beautiful.
If you start to walk around with different measurements, and there's like a 1/4 of an inch off, then the inside bowl is not going to fit into the outside bowl.
Right.
That's why
you can't just trim it down.
You cannot, because you've already sewn the seams.
Right.
So therefore, it became really important for me to make a book where you can use, where you're not relying on centimeters and inches. Because that was sort of one of the reasons why I decided. So it became a little, I just used to measure, 3/4 inch, and then for the pattern, but I had to come up with templates for the round. I also have templates for the square bowl, but for the round bowl that sort of we do not require measurements at all. It's just strictly templates, all based on templates, because some of the boards are like stars and they require, let me see if I can find it. I should have a star board somewhere. See, something like this, you're gonna have it exact.
Right.
These templates, because otherwise it won't fit. So that was one of the challenges that I had to face in this book. I didn't have in the first one, so it was fun. I mean, I like a good challenge, so that was kind of going on, so it was good.
Well, yeah, I can see how that would actually be a challenge, and like there's a whole design process that goes into making sure not only can it fit, but is it scalable? You know, can you do multi-size bowls using the templates?
Well, you can use, no, you can, there is a chapter in this book about how to change the size of the bowl.
Okay, good.
You can do that if you want to. The thing comes that if you're gonna play around with, and I love people. I have a student who did that, who just do the pattern like this, and then will start to cut it up into 100 pieces and sew them back together again. The trick is, in the book about the square bowl, there are 4 different sizes.
Okay.
All measurement. The smallest one is this little cute little one here.
Oh my gosh, that is just too cute.
Yeah, and then this is sort of old traditional quilting pattern.
Oh,
That's
wow.
the next size up. And then this is what I call the 12-inch bowl. And then one of my favorite, the Halloween bowl. And so
is that like 15 or 18 inches?
That's 15 inches.
Okay.
That's 18. And then the last one is this one. That's the big one. That's 18 inches.
That is just stunning. So
yeah, this is a beautiful
the embroidery, isn't it?
This is embroidery, yes. Yeah. The one thing when you start to do these bowls that's different from quilting, there is not an up and down or left and right.
Okay.
It's one thing to look at. So if you're going to get into do embroidery and applique, you're going to make sure you can see it from all sides. It doesn't look crazy. It's not just a sign in one direction. You're going to be able to turn it around.
All right. So there are design elements that you need to keep in mind
yes, that you're going to be able to see it from all sides and not just like a quilt, you see it from the front. Here you see it from all sides all the way around. But that's a fun challenge, and it works great for let me see what it works great for blocks, for quilt blocks. I have one. I can't look at it, but I had a okay, no, I don't know where it is, right? But I had one of my favorite bowls are like, it's a 9-pack. And you're just gonna persist. If you fussy cut, I love fussy cutting. It's one of my favorite things to do. And if you fussy cut, you're just gonna fussy cut it so you know that you can see it from all 4 sides. So
right. Well, even on the round bowls, if you're going to fussy cut, you need to make sure that you're going to see it from all the sides.
All the sides.
Do you work with are you looking for symmetry, or are you looking for a specific aesthetic as you're looking at the fabric?
I like symmetry. The one thing you're going to keep in mind, you're only making one block in theory.
Okay.
I mean, I have made bowls for the 18-inch bowls for every little 9-inch square was a block in itself. But otherwise, it's you're looking at one block. So it's you can keep it as simple as event as you want. I know people who love to slash up the interfacing and sew it back together again. As long as you know the sewing order and you can put it together, it's fine. The thing about sewing the seams together, like in the star bowls, I mean, you're going to make sure that there's a sewing order how to sew these 3 pieces together.
Okay.
And in the book, it's exactly what sewing order you sew this to this, and then this to this, and then so there's a specific way of doing it, because otherwise you get stuck in the last seams when it becomes 3-dimensional.
Okay. Yeah. You would start having
problems, particularly with the star bowls. Not so much with the bowls that are just like these. That's not an issue. But with the star bowls, you're gonna follow the sewing instructions. Otherwise, you can't sew together in the end. So
right.
And it was fun to work that out and figure out how to do that. So
yeah. when you're looking at fabric itself, like, does the fabric inspire a
Oh,
particular style of bowl, or you just kind of wing it?
I love looking at fabrics. I can spend looking at fabrics all day long if I have nothing else to do. And I would look at a fabric and say, wow, that is a perfect fabric for this. Let me see what's my see now this fabric screamed to be a flower. And there is somewhere in my world, I don't know exactly what that is. Okay. It also was used as a single star. Let me just see if I can find that. Okay. No, okay, that's tucked away somewhere, but it's it's you can use the same fabric over. See this fabric here in this bowl
Mhm.
is one of my all-time favorite fabrics.
Okay.
Somebody gave me several years ago a little half a yard of it, and then I could not locate for anywhere in the world. I couldn't locate, and finally I went on the internet one day, and there was a store in Texas that had it. And it's a fun story because somebody closed down the store, put everything in storage. Somebody opened up the storage thing and opened up a store with all of these fabrics. And it's like, I think from 2011. So that was a really great fun. So I love that kind of stuff. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And what machine do you use?
I use a Benina 440, I think it's called.
Okay.
I've had it for a million years. I like it. I have, like a lot of people, I have several sewing machines.
Okay.
The one thing is I also make really big bowls, just for fun. My biggest bowl, I think, was 33 inches by 33 inches. And that requires a whole different set of sewing machines. So I
Okay.
do have I think it's a baby lock that has a wider space, but otherwise I can't get the interfacing into it.
Mhm.
And I have what I call the workhorse in my stable. My mother-in-law gave me in 1977 a Kenmore sewing machine. Is iron cast.
Oh, yeah.
It cannot do anything really fancy. It can zigzag and go back and forward, but it is what all other machines says no. This machine just toggle right through it. It's amazing what that machine can sew through. And if I sew through like 5 layers of interfacing, because the big bowls, as you make the bowl bigger, it requires more and more interfacing to keep the shape. That machine will just go right through it. I love that about that machine. So it's
Right.
so and what I have a quilt, I can show you one I quilted. So this one here.
Wow.
This is a big bowl that was quilted.
Is that cherry wood fabric?
Some of it is.
Yeah.
Some of it I hand dyed. But see, to quilt through all these layers interfacing,
Yeah.
I mean, you really need a strong needle and a strong machine.
Right.
And that Kenmore just, the Benina said, wait a minute here. The Kenmore just went right through, like, okay, that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm doing right now. So that is, so that's.
And did that size of bowl make it into the book?
No, because we're now starting at I'll teach the class about how to change the shape and make bigger bowls. But when we start to adding 4 or 5 layers of heavy interfacing together, it becomes a whole different ball game.
Okay.
And I found with the first book, a lot of people just really want to make a fast little project they can make in an afternoon.
Okay. Got it.
And a lot of people have sent me pictures of the bowls that they made in an afternoon, and they're absolutely delightful. There are some people who want to go more advanced and start to make bigger things, and I'm all there for it. I think it's fun. That's what I like to do. But for the books, no. I will show you one thing that I think is a fun thing to do. I'm delighted that I have a little Danish girl who comes and visits me, and I'm teaching her how to quilt and how to make bowls.
Okay.
And so we did an afternoon where I made the inside and she drew it. It was a big hit. It's a unicorn. It was a big hit with her grandparents.
Oh, wow.
And it's a cute little present to do real fast. Give them a bowl and give them a water-soluble, non-water soluble markers and go at it. And so it's like, that's an afternoon project.
Yeah, well, that actually, I can see with something like that, I can see a kid's birthday party. You know, put the markers out,
Yeah.
give them a bowl,
Yeah.
let them choose, you know.
Yeah. So that's
Do that.
and he also did yeah, so you can also just give them ask them to cut out things and applicate on or fuse it on and other kind of stuff. So it's so I will say one thing, but I have experimented lately. You can actually wash them.
Yeah, I can see that.
You can wash them light hand wash with a mild soap. If there's a spot on it, you don't have to use a toothbrush on it. Rinse it out well and just leave it to dry. And it takes maybe 24 hours to dry out, but you can definitely wash them. I also have bowls that I had, if I do applique on them and I don't want to sew the applique down, I mud pot them.
Yes.
And then I
Okay.
lacquer it. And that's a fun thing to do because that's for a kid who can't sew, you just cut out some figures and they fuse them onto the bowl. And then you, when the seams are sewn together, you mud pot it and put lacquer on it and you have a great present for, you know, for grandparents. So it's a lot of small projects to do with this. And because bowls can be made in the afternoon, it's a fun thing. It's a fun thing. So
Now, is there a particular, when you're teaching, is there a particular pattern that you that you prefer to teach?
I've only taught the round bowl twice.
Okay.
And, it's a little bit more complicated because of the it takes a longer time to draw the pattern out in interfacing.
Mm-hmm.
I love to teach how to make the 9-patch. You know, it's always great to make a bowl based on 9-patch. I like quilting blocks, so so that's a fun. But I came across doing some research. I came across there is actually on the market several patterns for how to make bowls that I know McCall has one. It's almost sold out in the entire world, but I have one of the copies of it. Mm-hmm. So there, if you don't want to draw the pattern out of interfacing, there are options to buy the pattern. And I'm now in the process of doing research and we'll put on my website what patterns work for these balls and what does not. So if you don't want to draw the pattern, you can just go for the pattern you can buy and then do it. So it's
right.
Because the technique is the same for all the bowls. It doesn't change the size of the bowl and the shape of the bowl. It doesn't change the technique. You cut out the interfacing, you fuse it to the fabric, you sew the seams, and that's it. So that doesn't change because the size of the bowl or the shape of the bowl changes. So that.
What are you using for thread?
I use what Aerofill, I think you call it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say though, if
are you using the orange spool or the green spool?
I use the orange spool. It's not as strong as the garment. It's not always strong enough. It does make a nicer seam, but the garment is actually a stronger cotton to sew with when you sew next to interfacing. So that's yeah. I use both of them. It's
okay. Before we wrap up here, 2 questions. First, what are your top 3 tips for using for making the bowls?
Be careful with your fusing.
Right.
Because it's when you fuse a fabric to interfacing, you're gonna, if you use a dark fabric, it's hard to see if there's any bends in it or wrinkles in it, anything like that. So you really gotta, when you fuse your fabric, particularly if you fuse with Peltex, iron it on really well first. And then be aware of the fact that fabric gives a little bit when you fuse it.
Mm-hmm.
So it stretches when you fuse it onto the interfacing. So just be aware of that. Start from the middle and fuse out to the edge. that is and then the other thing is that take the time and pin. You know, it makes for a more exact bowl if you pin your seams before you sew them. And if you sew, because when you sew them like here, if you sew them right next to the interfacing, on both sides, you have no gaps or opening here that you could that sort of seem like there's nothing underneath it.
Okay.
So it is worth spending a little bit of time pinning your pieces together. It just is. And then, you know, for the first bowl, take your time. and don't start with the Dresden bolt in the second book as your first bowl, because it is tedious. There is 19 pieces in it. If you do the ones with the points, it does take time. If you do the one where you split up the slides in the middle of it, let me see if I can find that. Where did that book go? It just, let me just see. So here's the book. So this is a simple, the black and white. This one is really a simple bowl. It's just applied onto a black and white fabric. No problem. It's one piece of fabric. So this one, these are split. This is black fabric and white fabric. So there are over 30 pieces in this bowl here. So don't start with that.
No.
And the other thing is, be really exact when you cut out the templates, because what happens is that the template is the side of the interfacing. But when you sew two pieces together, you're adding the seam here, and that is two pieces of tiny, small, thin cotton. And you do 15 on them, like you will on some of the, on this bowl here. You add bulk to the measurements. So just be really careful when you do the when you make the templates, that you draw what you do is you use template plastic, you cut it out after you cut it, and then make sure you cannot see the seams that you drew, because that means that you template a little bit too big. We talk about, I mean, not even a 32th of an inch.
Okay.
But, but it does start to add bulk. I learned it the hard way. I can tell you that. All of a sudden, my inside bowl was too big for my outside bowl, and I had to redo the outside bowl, which is not a big deal, but it's just like it's easier to get it right the first time. So yeah.
Right. Well, well, with anything, it kind of takes practice. Before I move on to the next big questions, what pins do you use? Do you use flower head pins, ball head pins? Are they thicker?
I just use what I have pretty much. I like the small thin ones here. I don't even know what they're called, but I like these small ones here.
Okay.
You see, it's they go through fabric easily. That's it. I do use clips though. For some of the things, for the batting and for the binding, I use clips.
Okay.
To hold it together, because you're talking about 2 layers of interface and 2 layers of fabric, and it holds much better with clips than does with pins. So that
okay.
I love those clips.
I do too. I have loads of them. All right. So here's some fun questions.
Okay.
When you're in your studio and you're sewing, what do you drink?
I drink water.
You drink water.
Yeah. I drink tea in the morning to get me going, but then it's water. Yes, that it's pretty much water. I do not do well with too much caffeine because I can't sleep at night then. So it's tea in the morning, and then it's water the rest of the day. So that's
okay. And do you have a snack that you enjoy during the day, either while you're in the sewing room or not in the sewing room?
I don't really eat in my sewing room. I try not to. So I don't really. I love kin bars. That the small ones. That's my favorite snack, I think. So.
Okay. And when you're in your studio working, do you listen to anything?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. I work. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm playing around with my fabric to decide what fabric to put together, and I don't listen to music. Okay. If I sew and I sit and I rarely listen to it. I will sometime, if I'm just sitting sewing, if I do a quilt and I'm sitting sewing seam after seam after seam, I might put some music on. But otherwise, I don't really listen to a lot of music. But when I work, it's not. When I do ironing, I listen to music, but otherwise not really. I just and it's a big variety of what I'm listening to. What I'm with that day. It's it's not. I try to keep my workroom as my workroom.
Okay.
I have on my door, I have what I use for quilting. So I have what I call my timesheet. I have the date, I have the project, and I have the time in and time out. And I started that because people were asking me, when people ask to if I could do certain things from them, or like I realized I didn't know how long time things were taking when I made a quilt.
Right.
And because here's the thing, people expect you to make a baby quilt for them, right? And they think it's barely worth anything, right? I mean, how bad can it be to throw these seams together, right? I mean, and when you look at people selling their quilts and what people are willing to pay for it is like outrageous. What people say, oh, $75, $100, and then so to some of the people, I just want to know how much time goes into making a baby quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a date and a project and a time in and time out, it really, well, no, this was like, this was not just 20 hours. This was
Right.
hundreds of hours that people sat there and cut the pieces out and sew them together. And we think about, am I going to do this fabric or this fabric? How to put them together? So so that is one of the things I do. That I sort of, so I sort of say, okay, I'm working now, and of course I, like everybody else, I get distracted and go look at the fabric and to go back again. The cat comes in the door, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so it's but
So you have approximate hours for how long things will take
you
you.
want to know that a little bit. It's and I think it helped when my guild had their we have sort of a charity auction, or some people put things up, and people like thought they could buy for like $20, and you realize that no, these are pieces of work that people put a lot of money and time into it, and money for fabrics. It's not just $20. And I think it puts things in perspective and value what people are doing a little bit more than just, okay, it's just a baby quilt. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad that thank you for taking the time to say that, because one of the things that I know that in our industry, in the quilting world, our work tends to be undervalued.
Yes.
And part of that is, there's somebody that I've had the conversation with, I just do this for fun, so I just want to get this back. No, what you're doing is you're harming other people who are taking on this as paid work, by essentially giving it away.
I think I don't make a lot of quilts anymore. I do make baby quilts for very special babies,
Right.
and it's fun and it's great, and I don't figure how much time I'm using on it. But when you do projects, I made some bold, and I want to figure out how much time do I put into this, and it gives you an idea about what how much time it takes and what the value of your time is. And I think people are underestimating, because a lot of people are quilting as part of the job, or for making extra money, and I think we have to value that and learn to get respected for that. And not just, well, this is some women sewing, Sunday afternoon with nothing else to do, because that's not what it is anymore. So
no, and honestly, it never. In all honesty, it really never has been. I mean, sometimes it's for fun on a Sunday afternoon, for sure, but garment making is a skill. I'm looking at your bowls and I am in awe, in large part because I understand the development of skill that went into that. There was that first bowl that you made for your mom so that she would have her keys, but look at the development that went into that, the trying out of things, seeing what worked, what didn't, what tools were necessary for making it, which machines, which needles are going to work. Like it is a long experiment to get to the point where you're teaching a class and writing books and that kind of, like, there's a lot that goes into that. So I'm looking at your bowls and I'm in awe, because I know that this is a long series of work that got you to this point.
On that note, in my first book, I gave tribute to my math teacher in high school.
Right.
But without him, I would never have been able to do this. He made math fun, and made me believe I could solve any math problem I wanted. And I'm looking at all the women that came before us and make these intricate star designs and quilt designs, and the joy they must have had with geometry and figuring out how to do these things. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate the inheritance we got from these women that did this, made the fantastic blocks that we all use today. And my math teacher, I mean, he was just convinced that math was the easiest thing in the world, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. And when I came up with my first book, the template has a really odd angle of 58.3 degrees. And I came to that because if it was 60, you couldn't quite sew it right. And 55 didn't really work for the shape I wanted. So it became this odd shape. But he taught me not to be afraid of 53.3 degrees or something like that. It's just, so that was a challenge for me to come up with seams I could actually sew. And that there's a lot of math gone into it. I spent a lot of hours with my rulers and that kind of stuff to come up with something that could actually work. So yeah, it's a lot of work with it.
I love that your math teacher gave you that confidence that this is another component of the skill set for figuring things out. It is one of those tools in your toolbox. And like you had that math teacher, I had a geometry teacher who had this "you can do it" attitude that was catching.
Yes, and we benefit from it today. I really like not being afraid of math and geometry. It is a big help. So
thank you, Kirsten, for coming today. It has been such a pleasure talking to you.